There is a quiet hour in every craft world when the halls fall still and the dust of ancient archives hangs motionless in the light. It is in this silence that Aeldari weapons reveal their nature most clearly, untouched by urgency, shaped by intention rather than haste. From this stillness begins the story of the Shuriken catapult, the weapon that defines Aeldari infantry not through force or spectacle, but through the refinement of controlled destruction. Its wraith-bone structure carries the fluid geometry of something grown rather than forged, and within it, a gravitic pulse field guides monomolecular disks with such efficiency that impact becomes irrelevant. What matters is the cut, the quiet, perfect severing of whatever stands in the weapon's path. The catapult does not fire in the crude sense of the word. It releases, letting each disc glide forward on a cushion of compressed motion until the field collapses and the blade sharpens into lethal purpose. Armor yields not because it is battered, but because it is persuaded apart at its smallest bonds, opening as if instructed by some higher logic of division. On the battlefield, this creates lanes of absence, narrow corridors carved through advancing formations where bodies fall before they understand what has passed. And from this principle grows the smaller, more intimate Shuriken pistol, tuned for distances measured in steps rather than spans. It mirrors the catapult's mechanism, but compresses it, concentrating the grav pulses into rapid bursts that respond instantly to a warrior's movement. The pistol becomes an extension of instinct, a weapon for those who move through combat rather than standing against it, cutting joints, tendons, and exposed seams with decisive flicks of the wrist. Where the catapult shapes the battlefield at range, the pistol governs the narrow spaces between combatants, rewriting the flow of close encounters with the same quiet authority. As the distances stretch once more and the rhythm of battle expands beyond the tight confines where pistols reign, the lineage continues into the Shuriken rifle, a weapon that carries the same core principle, yet grants it a steadier, longer breath. The rifle does not seek dominance through power, but through balance, its elongated wraith-bone barrel acting as a stabilizing conduit for grav pulses stretched across greater spans. Each disc is held in suspension a fraction longer before release, gaining a smoother trajectory and a cleaner rotational edge, turning every shot into a deliberate incision drawn across space. The effect is neither explosive nor theatrical. It is a slow rearrangement of the battlefield, a methodical carving of visibility and movement, where enemy formations feel themselves thinned not by panic, but by the quiet precision of loss. Aeldari warriors wield the rifle not as a blunt tool, but as a brush that redraws lines of advance, controlling angles, denying flanking paths, shaping the enemy's momentum with the accuracy of someone accustomed to sculpting rather than destroying. With every burst, the rifle spreads a fine geometry of absence, the discs cutting through layered armor and synthetic fibers as though memory itself had sharpened them. And from this controlled long-range discipline emerges a more forceful divergence of the same philosophy, one that abandons subtlety for breadth as the scatter laser enters the field. It breaks the refined stream of monomolecular discs into a fan of coherent light beams, accelerated through rotating crystal matrices, each beam carrying enough directed energy to cleave through multiple targets before dissipating. Where the rifle is a whisper drawn across distance, the scatter laser is a sweeping gesture, clearing paths through massed infantry, erasing cover, turning clustered formations into fractured remnants. Its presence shifts the tone of battle. No longer a dialogue of precision, it becomes a negotiation of space, forcing adversaries to disperse and abandon density, lest they be caught within the wide, slicing arcs of concentrated light. Yet, even this transformation remains aligned with Aeldari intent, never crude, never wasteful, always guided by the principle that the battlefield is something to be shaped, not overwhelmed. From the sweeping arcs of dispersed light, the weapon's lineage narrows again into a single, piercing vector as the bright lance emerges, a device engineered not for breadth, but for absolute focus. It channels its energy through a wraithbone spine, reinforced with crystalline conduits, each pulse compressed until it becomes a needle of brilliance capable of unmaking armored shapes in a single, unwavering line. There is no recoil, no thunderous discharge, only a straight path of annihilation that leaves a clean breach through metal, composites, and reinforced hulls. The lance does not tear or burn. It erases, unraveling structure at its most fundamental bonds, reducing even the heaviest war engines to hollowed silhouettes in the span of a breath. For Aeldari forces, this weapon does not simply counter armor. It changes the enemy's calculus, turning fortifications into fragile illusions and armored columns into liabilities that cannot risk exposure to its silent glare. And when the battlefield shifts once more into moments requiring persistent fire rather than singular precision, the same disciplined cruelty transforms into the rotating storm of the starcannon, whose tri-barrel assembly spins with measured inevitability. Each rotation charges a series of focused plasma bursts, releasing them in steady intervals that carve glowing paths through advancing infantry and armored escorts alike. The starcannon's fire is not chaotic. It is metronomic, a slow, oppressive rhythm that breaks the resolve of any formation attempting to hold ground under its pressure. Its bursts strike with the weight of miniature suns, collapsing shielding, melting armor plates, and forcing enemies into motion they did not choose. Yet, even within this raw, destructive cadence, the weapon retains the Aeldari signature, precision within overwhelming force, a sense that every shot has a purpose, that every impact is part of a larger geometry, shaping the battlefield toward a state of controlled inevitability. From the heavy cadence of the starcannon, the Aeldari turn again toward a quieter form of dominance, one meant not for the moving warrior, but for the spaces that must remain inviolate. Thus emerges the Shuriken storm, an automated turret grown from wraithbone roots and tuned to act as an extension of its craftsman's intent, long after the artisan has stepped away. It watches without fatigue, reading the subtle shifts of air currents, the changing hum of distant footsteps, the minute heat signatures that betray movement across corridors, open plains, or the narrow throats of fortified passages. When it fires, it does so with the same refined principle as its handheld kin, discs suspended, accelerated, and released with quiet inevitability. Yet the difference lies in the turret's constancy, its ability to maintain a seamless veil of cutting trajectories that punish any intrusion. It is neither aggressive nor frantic. It is simply present, a silent arbiter of territory whose patterns of fire redraw proximity into something the enemy cannot safely inhabit. And from this mechanized vigilance, rises a more esoteric branch of the lineage, the warp Shuriken, where the principle of the monomolecular disc crosses the threshold into psychoactive resonance. In these weapons, the physical blade is only half the equation. The other half is a sliver of focused psychic imprint, an echo of the wielder's will embedded within the disc's structure. Upon release, the Shuriken slips through matter, not purely by sharpness, but by destabilizing the target's cohesion at a level neither mechanical nor energetic, creating brief distortions that bloom along its passage like silent fractures in reality. Armor does not merely split. It forgets its integrity for a moment, opening as though persuaded by a force older than metal and deeper than impact. These weapons are found among those who walk the narrower paths of Aeldari existence, warriors whose minds are trained to braid intent into motion. Each warp Shuriken becomes a fleeting extension of identity, a blade that carries not only velocity, but purpose, turning a single strike into a disturbance that ripples through the battlefield, with consequences impossible to anticipate through material logic alone. From the subtle distortions carried by warp-touched blades, the lineage shifts once more into the open sky, where velocity itself becomes the shaping force of destruction. Here emerges the swooping hawk Shuriken, a weapon refined to meet the demands of warriors who fight not upon the ground, but through the restless currents above it. Their movements are abrupt, sweeping, momentary. Their angles of attack change faster than any ground-bound weapon could track. And so, the discs they release are lighter, their grav-pulse chambers tuned for immediate acceleration rather than sustained suspension, allowing each shot to stabilize in the slipstreams trailing behind airborne motion. These shurikens carve downward arcs that feel almost organic, as though guided by the same thermal drafts that carry their wielders across the battlefield. They do not cut with the heavy insistence of ground weapons, but with the clean, gliding precision of something released from height, slicing into joints, neck seals, sensory clusters, places exposed for only a heartbeat before being swallowed again by the shifting geometry of flight. And as these airborne trajectories spiral downward, the lineage returns to the intimacy of close engagement through the compact but potent Shuriken launcher, a device mounted beneath other weapons or armor plates to deliver sudden bursts of monomolecular discs in the narrow intervals where larger systems cannot respond. It is not a primary armament, but a decisive one, emerging in tight corners, trench angles, boarding routes, and all the confined spaces where the battlefield compresses into something harsh and immediate. The launcher operates with a shortened pulse chamber and a truncated disc feed mechanism, sacrificing endurance for immediacy, releasing a tightly packed pattern of blades that tear through proximity before the enemy can recover from the shock of their appearance. In these moments, the weapon acts less like an independent system and more like a reflex, a concealed extension of the warrior's movement, a final adjustment in the close quarters dialogue where hesitation becomes fatal. And so, between the airy arcs of the swooping hawks and the sudden compressed violence of the underslung launcher, the Shuriken lineage completes its first great circle, moving from long-range incision to airborne glide to the intimate brutality of close-range release, each transformation preserving the same unwavering principle. That precision, once mastered, can adapt to any distance, any angle, any moment of battle. From the tight, sudden violence of the underslung launcher, the lineage bends back toward controlled range, where the battles of the Aeldari often begin and end with the quiet assertion of what spaces may be crossed and which are already claimed. It is here that the Shuriken catapult, in its more advanced battlefield variants, reappears as the stabilizing core of their doctrine, its familiar mechanism refined for sustained engagements rather than initial volleys. These iterations do not reinvent the principles of the weapon, but deepen them, expanding feed channels, strengthening grav pulse regulators, allowing a near-continuous stream of monomolecular disks to form a living barrier against advancing threats. What was once a burst becomes a curtain, a thin, seamless wall of cutting paths that forces the enemy to break formation long before contact occurs. The Aeldari treat this not as suppression, for suppression implies noise and panic. Instead, it is correction, an adjustment imposed upon hostile movement with the calm inevitability of a hand guiding a drifting object back into place. Under this steady rhythm, the battlefield transforms into a map of narrow safe routes and wide forbidden zones, each shaped by the disciplined breath of the weapon's fire. And as the engagement stretches, the Shuriken stormlines interact with terrain, ricocheting off wraithbone structures, slipping through gaps in ruined masonry, weaving between the movements of allied warriors with such precision that the volleys feel less like projectiles and more like threads being drawn across an intricate loom. In this pattern, one sees the essence of Aeldari warfare, not force, not spectacle, but the shaping of space through intention, the quiet insistence that the flow of battle obeys the logic of those who mastered such weapons long before their enemies understood what they were facing. And when the long circuit of the lineage finally closes, when every variant of disc and beam and focused intent has revealed its place within the shifting geometries of Aeldari warcraft, the pattern settles back into stillness, as though the weapons themselves exhale after being carried across so many forms of motion. The battlefield, once carved by thin arcs of monomolecular blades and narrow lines of concentrated light, retains the echo of their passage, not in sound, but in the subtle rearrangement of space, where movement had been redirected, halted, or allowed to continue. Even the discarded discs lying half buried in dust or embedded in shattered armor seem less like remnants of violence and more like fragments of a larger design, pieces of a language expressed through precision rather than force. In the quiet that follows, one can sense the deeper unity of these weapons, not a collection of systems, but a single idea carried through many shapes, each responding to the demands of distance, angle, and moment with the same calm inevitability. And as the last vibrations fade from the grav pulse chambers, as the air settles where flight paths and cutting lines once crossed, the world regains its stillness, an untouched silence that feels as if it has always been there, waiting to return once the geometry of battle has finished drawing its final, delicate stroke.